Hello, and welcome to the pre-concert lecture for the Schubert Club's opening Maud Moon Weyerhaeuser Sanborn International Artist Series. My name is Mark Bilyeu, and I'm thrilled to join you in experiencing the recital of tenor Lawrence Brownlee and pianist Myra Huang. These artists have crafted a program which offers us an opportunity to see them both shine, and I hope these next few minutes we will have together will help expand your understanding of the music we'll hear and deepen your appreciation for their artistry. The first half of this recital shows us why Mr. Brownlee is the envy of so many tenors: the bel canto singing and the high notes. While the Italian term bel canto literally translates to beautiful singing, there is so much more to bel canto. The bel canto style means flashy vocal gymnastics, known as coloratura or fioratura, long, spinning vocal lines showcasing athletic breath support, reflecting mood and meaning in the music, and the use of portamento, or graceful sliding between notes. Bel canto genre means composers like Donizetti, Bellini, and Rossini writing both comic and serious operas that were not ideologically based, like Verdi or Wagner would be. And bel canto also means, of course, diva and divo worship. Stars, stars, stars. Maria Callas, Renata Tebaldi, Luciano Pavarotti, Joan Sutherland, Juan Diego Flores, Montserrat Caballé, and of course, Lawrence Brownlee. And even though she is an incredibly gifted performer, and despite what Hollywood wants you to believe with their 2018 film entitled Bel Canto, Juliana Moore is not an operatic diva. After winning the Met Council auditions in 2001, Mr. Brownlee has made a career as a leading bel canto tenor. Now, being a bel canto tenor is a dangerous profession. It took centuries for tenors to finally be cast as the heroes and love interests they always knew they were, and when they had finally arrived, there were tenor bodies strewn everywhere. We all remember the castrati of Italy, the rock stars of 17th and 18th century opera, men whose manhood was surgically removed before puberty to maintain their unbroken voices. These were the heroes, love interests, and the heartthrobs of the stage. But as time went on, the English and Germans became more interested in lower voices. Think of Mozart's Figaro and Don Giovanni. While the basses and baritones were winning hearts and minds on stage, the castrati turned to teaching and began training tenors to sound like them, so they could sing the roles written for the castrati, high notes in that unbroken, pure head-voice falsetto. In a dramatic change of aesthetics, it then became fashionable for these tenors to reach these high notes with their chest voices, which is where things get a little dicey. Meet Domenico Donzelli, Italian tenor, famous for singing the operas of Bellini and Rossini, and for his barytenor sound, which used more of his chest voice than most, starting to set a most unwelcome standard for his colleagues. Colleagues such as Americo Spigoli, who in 1821 sang alongside Donizetti in the premiere of Donizetti's Zoraida di Granata at Rome's Teatro Argentina. In trying to match Donzelli's chest voice during a quartet rehearsal and having no training to actually do so, Spigoli reportedly burst a blood vessel in his throat and thereupon died. We have Gilbert Dupre, who, 10 years after the untimely death of Mr. Spigoli, took part in the Italian premiere performance of Rossini's William Tell, singing for the first time in an opera theater a high C sung not in the so-called falsetto. Alongside him was another, more prominent and more successful leading tenor of the time, the Frenchman Adolphe Nourrit. While Dupre continued to travel as a celebrated tenor who sang in this thrilling, more virile style, Nourrit was unable to achieve this scale. He traveled to Italy in hopes of training with his Italian colleagues' teachers, but was unsuccessful. A combination of poor physical health and this professional failure drove him to suicide. This changing of the tenor aesthetic went hand in hand with the roles tenors played, turning into heroic, strong, ready-to-fight for what's right characters who don't back down. They get the respect, and they get the lady. One of the more famous ladies Mr. Brownlee has won over while on stage was the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. who made her professional speaking operatic debut alongside Mr. Brownlee, appearing as the Duchess of Krakenthorpe in Donizetti's Daughter of the Regiment at Washington National Opera in 2016. So, while composers gave the tenors the ladies, the sounds the tenors were making were not wooing everybody. The critic Stendhal wrote, "The tenor Donzelli is very fine. His voice, however, does not impress me at all. It is veiled and, in the upper notes, resembles a yell." And Rossini himself famously said the tenors singing his own high Cs with their chest voice sounded like, quote, "the squawk of a capon with its throat cut." A capon is, of course, a chicken which has had its testicles removed. So now we better understand how these roles we'll hear Mr. Brownlee sing today have developed, and we'll especially appreciate this new sound which we find so thrilling, and which Mr. Brownlee delivers like none other. I'm also personally very grateful for the progress vocal science has made since 1822, allowing us to be thrilled by the sound, but not terrified of the outcomes. So, Donizetti's Daughter of the Regiment has brought about Mr. Brownlee's operatic success and launched him into stardom, but the opera itself has also helped, rather serendipitously, to bring about the work we'll hear in the second half. A collaboration between Mr. Brownlee and multi-genre recording artist, composer, and instrumentalist Damien Sneed. Mr. Brownlee and Mr. Sneed met backstage through a mutual friend at the Met Opera after what else but a performance of Rossini's Daughter of the Regiment. They had dinner, and a project Spiritual Sketches were born. While we might be familiar with hearing spirituals arranged for concerts, and we will come back to these outstanding arrangements by Mr. Sneed, the first published spiritual was printed only 100 years ago in 1917 by H.T. Burleigh, an African-American composer and then student of Antonin Dvorak. African-American spirituals, or as they are often called by their historical titles, Negro spirituals, first gained prominence in the concert halls thanks nearly exclusively to the Fisk Jubilee Singers. These students, attending Fisk University in Nashville, began an effort to raise money for the financially struggling university. Their performances of these spirituals not only saved the university, but brought them all over the world, singing for foreign royalty and sharing these songs. Nearly 50 years later, composer and conductor Hall Johnson launched the Hall Johnson Negro Choir, saying he wanted, quote, "to show how the American Negro slaves, in 250 years of constant practice, self-developed under pressure, but equipped with their inborn sense of rhythm and drama, plus their new religion, created, propagated, and illuminated an art form which was, and still is, unique in the world of music." Hall and others began setting these dramatic and rhythmic songs for a single vocalist and piano, challenging both singer and pianist, and beginning to codify things like melodic inflection and dialect, although both of these aspects of performance are still very much left up to the performer. As Johnson would later write, "True enough, this music was transmitted to us through humble channels, but its source is that of all great art everywhere, the unquenchable, divinely human longing for a perfect realization of life. It traverses every shade of emotion without spilling over in any direction. Its most tragic utterances are without pessimism, and its lightest, brightest moments have nothing to do with frivolity. In its darkest expression, there is always a hope, and in its gayest measures, a constant reminder. Born out of the heart cries of a captive people who still did not forget how to laugh, this music covers an amazing range of moods. Nevertheless, it is always serious music and should be performed seriously in the spirit of its original conception." So then, back to the collaboration with Damien Sneed and Lawrence Brownlee, the youngest pieces on today's program. Whereas at the time, Hall Johnson's goals were to have people hear the songs and begin to understand their origins and value, Mr. Sneed takes them one step farther to incorporate musical styles that are, in fact, direct descendants of the spiritual itself. As he and Mr. Brownlee explained in an interview with Bob Marovich with the Black Gospel blog, who asked, "What do you hope Spiritual Sketches will evoke in its listeners?" Mr. Sneed started. One of the reasons for the creation of this project was for more people to be exposed to different genres of music. For example, we wanted to create a space for people who only listen to classical music to feel okay with exploring jazz and gospel. We also wanted those who didn't necessarily listen to gospel music to be overtaken by the ministry that is the spirituals. Mr. Brownlee followed up, there seemed to be some type of divide where people can't like one type of music without hating the other type. When people listen to the radio, they don't realize that they are listening to artists who were influenced by Brahms or Beethoven, or this person or that person. So what we've done is to bring these sounds together. We want to bridge that divide. The last work on the program today is a 5-movement work entitled Cantata by John Carter. Although Carter had success as a concert pianist, performing with the Atlanta Symphony and Baltimore Symphonies, and being the first African-American composer to be named a composer in residence of a major orchestra, Washington National Symphony, we know very little of him. Both David Evan Thomas and I took from pianist Casey Robard's dissertation on John Carter, which is the most complete document about his life and music. It is actually linked in the online program through David's program notes, and I highly recommend you take a look. John Carter's cantata is a unique set of spiritual settings for many reasons. First and foremost, the title, which doesn't indicate the work is based on spirituals at all. In fact, the title and the work's movements use labels that harken all the way back to the 17th century. The cantata originated as a dramatic musical form for a solo voice with accompaniment, for locations and audiences for which opera was not allowed on account of it being too bawdy or too theatrical for the religious benefactors. Carter's movements are also unique in the first movement, Prelude, is actually a piano prelude, and we then move to a rondo, which is typically an instrumental form. Before the barn-burning closer, Ride on King Jesus, Carter offers us a pairing of recitative and air or aria, harkening back to the operatic forms that we heard in the first half of this recital. The work was given legs, not unlike spiritual sketches, over dinner. This time it was John Carter and soprano Leontine Price. Carter recounted, I was at a Christmas dinner several years ago with Miss Price, and she asked what I was writing, and I told her. She asked me to play it for her, but I told her I couldn't. It wasn't finished. I'll sing it in 2 weeks at Constitution Hall, she told me, if you'll mail it to me on the road. I did, and she did. And so it happened. Leontine Price and pianist David Garvey premiered the work, and the critics loved it. The songs retain the spirit of the spirituals, though they have been concertized, symphonized as it were. John Carter's the composer, and he was present to thank Miss Price and pianist David Garvey for their brilliant account. The closing of Ring Dem Bells and Garvey's playing of the final toccata were 2 of the day's breathtaking tour de force. Among John Carter's other works, piano concerto, small orchestral works, and ballet music, cantata is his calling card. The last 10 years of his life are nearly a mystery to us, having left for Europe, and eventually returning to the US, where he died at the age of 49. As for his music, he described it to the Washington Post when he was asked what he regarded as the principal formative influence on his music. He said, quote, Negro music, all of it, spirituals, shouts and hollers, work songs, funeral music, jazz too, but in a minor way. However, I'm trying to do something quite different from the usual spiritual adaptations or settings one hears, which I think are mostly awful. There are exceptions, of course. Hall Johnson, for instance. I think I've benefited greatly from studying his work, but my own approach is something else. My purpose in using Negro melodies is to preserve the spirit of the original, which is, after all, unique, but at the same time to bring them into the mainstream of Western music. In other words, my compositions are as distant from the conventional spiritual arrangements as, say, Bartók's music is from traditional Hungarian tunes. To close, I've got a treat to tie all these parts together. It is the archival recording of Leontine Price and David Garvey, the artist to premiere cantata, performing the spiritual Ride on King Jesus, the final movement of cantata, this time arranged by Hall Johnson, the proclaimed major influence on John Carter, at their historic concert to open the Ordway here in St. Paul, where Mr. Brownlee and Miss Huang will perform their program. Let's take a listen. As we wrap up and get ready to enter the concert hall, we must acknowledge how unique it is to hear this many spirituals sung on a single program. The Schubert Club's well-documented history shows the first performance of spiritual arrangements by the Edith Rubel Trio in 1917, the same year this photo was taken of them. That's just 1 year after the first publishing by H.T. Burleigh. 2 years later, soprano Mabel Garrison offered several on her 1919 Schubert Club recital. Since then, international artists such as Denise Graves, Todd Duncan, Lawrence Winters, Jesse Norman, Mattawilda Dobbs, Misha Brugers-Grossman, Ella Bell Davis, and Leontine Price have programmed these songs for our Minnesota audiences. By offering us this program today, Mr. Brownlee and Miss Huang have increased the number of spirituals heard at the Schubert Club by 30%. And for that, we owe them our thanks. I'm so looking forward to this recital, and I hope you are too.